There is disinformation in the world, but most of it, by my judgment, comes from the government. Most of the time, it's what the government calls disinformation. It's just skepticism or dissent, having a different opinion. That's not disinformation. It's just another point of view. And in fact, so many conspiracy theories have later come true. I mean, this is just the craziest clip here. This is the same Albert Bourla at the World Economic Forum a few years ago, talking about something that if you saw it on Alex Jones and InfoWars, you'd say, oh, that's a crazy conspiracy theory. No, they really did say this. Take a look.
It is basically biological chip that it is in the tablet. And once you take the tablet and dissolves into your stomach, sends a signal that you took the tablet. So imagine the applications of that, compliance, the insurance companies to know that the medicines that patients should take, they do take them. It is fascinating what happens in this field.
So many of the things that are being spoken about by conventional wisdom today were considered radical and illegal misinformation just years or even months ago. Here's Bill Gates talking about the vaccines and basically the fact that they don't work.
The current vaccines are not infection blocking. They're not broad, so when new variants come up, you lose protection. And they have very short duration, particularly in the people who matter, which are old people. And every one of those things is fixable. In fact, doing that work is going to help vaccinology very, very broadly.
The current vaccines are not infection blocking. They're not broad. They have very short duration. Oh, I didn't know you were allowed to say that, but I guess if you're Bill Gates, you can say whatever you want, and that becomes the new normal. Remember my question to Albert Bourla about the changing efficacy and transmissibility, first 100%, then 90%? Remember this question I asked him? You said it was 100% effective, then 90%, then 80%, then 70%. But we now know that the vaccines do not stop transmission. Why did you keep that secret?
Have a nice day.
I won't have a nice day until I know the answer. Why did you keep it a secret that your vaccine did not stop transmission? Those questions were inspired by this online video montage. I don't know who made it, but this was on my mind when I asked Bourla those questions. So again, is that misinformation from the head of Pfizer and the many people he paid? Well, of course it was misinformation. Or as it used to be called, advertising. Of course, there are some rules about false advertising. As the Department of Justice called it, deceptive marketing. When they convicted Pfizer, made them pay the largest fine to that point in history, $2.3 billion. Now, the establishment loves vaccines, and they'll tell misinformation and disinformation to get you to buy vaccines and take vaccines. And the establishment hates the truckers, in part because the truckers were against forced vaccines. And the new official message track, of course, for the past year is that the Ukraine war and Vladimir Putin are central to our lives. So the perfect storm was gathering, connecting all three of these things, vaccines, truckers, and Vladimir Putin. So obviously the CBC put it all together in this perfect comment.
I do ask that because, given Canada's support of Ukraine in this current crisis with Russia, I don't know if it's far-fetched to ask, but there is concern that Russian actors could be continuing to fuel things as this protest grows, but perhaps even instigating it from the outset.
Well, that was an embarrassing joke. Even more embarrassing was the CBC, whose own ombudsman admitted it was sloppy, even for them. Their own internal review wrote a long justification of it, but said in the end, quote, I did, though, come away from my review with some broader concerns. I am disappointed that it took others to point out to CBC that the question was off. It should have been caught before broadcast. I am also disappointed that programmers were not more sensitive in advance to the perils of speculating on subjects such as the convoy or Russian interference in Canadian affairs. Yeah, no, the CBC lied. It took them the better part of a year to half own up to it. And of course, they promoted that liar. So yeah, misinformation, disinformation, which brings us to the news today. The Pfizer lies are enormous. $100 billion turned on it, so of course they're going to lie. The CBC lies are just huge. Smear the truckers, Trudeau's real enemy. The first real opposition to Trudeau in nearly a decade, smear them. But what is the biggest lying machine in Canada? What machine has lied to an entire generation? Our universities, of course, are woke professors. Partly because they're naturally leftist, but partly because they are, in many cases, funded by Trudeau and his grants. Trudeau has colonized academia just like he has colonized the news media. Here's a longtime regime journalist, Stephen Maher, who said, it is reasonable to infer that RT, Russia Today's extensive coverage of the convoy, may be just the most visible sign of a broader influence campaign encompassing other actors and activities, including proxy sources, cyber operations, social media accounts. RT is Putin's state broadcaster, like the CBC is to Trudeau. And he was linking to this. I published a 7,000-word analysis in the Journal of Intelligence, Conflict and Warfare today, documenting evidence of Russian influence activities targeting the 2022 Canadian Freedom Convoy by state-funded media, proxy sources, and Telegram groups. Now, I did my best to read this 7,000-word essay, but really, it didn't need to be 7,000 words long. I don't know, unless she was getting paid by the word or something, which could be, or she was trying to make it look like there was more substance there, like there was more than there really was. Let me read to you the abstract, which is an academic way of saying a summary of an article. Russia's role in the far-right truck convoy sort of gives away where she's coming from right there, doesn't it? An analysis of Russian state media activity related to the 2022 Freedom Convoy by Caroline Orr Bueno, University of Maryland, United States. Because who knows more about the Canadian truckers than someone writing in Maryland? That's an excerpt from my show every night. It's called The Ezra Levant Show. That's me, Ezra Levant. You can see the whole thing behind our paywall. Well, there's a lot of goodies behind there. I do a show every weeknight. My friends Sheila Gunn Reid and David Menzies and Nat and Kat have their shows too. You get a ton of content for just $8 a month. There's so much in there you won't find anywhere else. Go to rebelnewsplus.com.